In case you don't know me, I'm the editor of B&T magazine. It's a little magazine, talks about advertising, marketing and media. It's my honour to host this panel today, and to my right I have Nicole McInnes from OVO, which is a very interesting little startup, but Nicole's been a long-time friend of B&T. We've known you since AdShell days.
Yeah.
And, AdShell,
Pandora,
Woolies.
Yeah.
Yeah, you've been around a bit.
Yeah, I've been around.
So, but excellent marketer, judges a lot of our awards, comes up with lots of great insight. And to Nicole's right is John Stubley, who's with GumGum. So GumGum is a pretty interesting AI targeting. John, a few more words about your company.
Sure. So GumGum at heart is an artificial intelligence business, and we specialise in an area known as computer vision, meaning that essentially what our business does, it gives us the ability to look at images in an online environment much as the human eye would, and to be able to categorise those images all the way down to keyword level. So from a targeting perspective, we're able to target either at that keyword level or more generically at a vertical such as sport or entertainment, etc. Refreshing.
Thank you, mate. So you can see the subject today is why contextual targeting is the only targeting left. Nicole and I had to have a little bit of a refresh on what that actually meant when we saw that topic. Mercifully, John's an expert at this sort of stuff. But I mean, I'm just going to tell you in my really layman's terms what contextual targeting is. So if you think about a time before the internet, if it's possible, contextual targeting was when, if you were reading an automotive magazine, you would see automotive ads in a magazine, which kind of made sense, yeah, it worked well. Or if you were in a general news, it'd be sales for David Jones, because that's a more broader sort of thing. So that was an old thing. Holiday sections, holiday ads in travel sections of newspapers, that sort of thing. That's what contextual targeting sort of was. But then the internet popped along and it changed all that. And we as publishers, I like to say, we committed the original sin and we completely commoditized the ad blocks on all of our internet sites, because we didn't quite understand that it was really a big deal when we did that. But we couldn't put the toothpaste back in the tube once it was out. And so basically all ad units were commoditized, and this whole phenomenon of behavioural targeting came out, which we thought was a fabulous thing, because what it meant was you had all this inventory on these web pages that you just couldn't sell because people wanted to be on the homepage and that was about it. And third-party people like Google, for instance, stuff would say, we'll sell that for you on your behalf, and you'll make money for that. We didn't realise that the checks that were going to come at the end of the month were going to be like $30 rather than 300,000. So that was a bit of a thing. Anyway, the story of magazine publishing in 30 seconds. Moving along though, since that time, the scale has moved quite a bit. Then we had this issue of brand safety and privacy and a few things like that. But so to sort of, we're going to drill down a little bit more into what's happened now, because we've all gone from just spray and pray, put your ads everywhere, to something a little bit more. So why is contextual targeting a little bit better than behavioural, John? Give us the lowdown.
Yeah, well, I believe there's a place for both targeting, but as we're kind of seeing in the industry and right across the board, but mostly out of the UK, led by GDPR at the moment, is people's protection of their own data is at the forefront of people's minds at the moment. We're seeing it in Australia as well right now. I mean, I think a pretty good example of data privacy is what's going on with medical records in Australia right now. But in terms of how that works from an advertising targeting perspective, as we tighten up those parameters around people's personal data, it makes it harder to target behaviourally, because if you're familiar with cookies are now harder to actually collect and target people's internet use on the basis of that. So that provides an opportunity for contextual advertising, which has never really gone away. It's just been deprioritised to some degree. And so what we mean by that is placing an ad in the context of some content that's relevant to the consumer. So to give you an example, if we're looking at, say, an auto advertiser advertising within an auto content piece, an auto review or something like that, that's a great example of some contextual advertising. But if we were to collect data on that person via a cookie on that page, and that person was then to, say, visit a recipe site, that could be a trigger from a behavioural point of view to serve up an ad to that same person, but in a recipe site. Now, the question you've got to ask yourself is that ad going to be quite as effective when someone isn't in the right mindset to be considering an auto purchase because they're worrying about what they're going to have for dinner, for instance, that night, as opposed to if they're actually in the mindset reading a new car review on the latest Mercedes or something like that, which then puts that on the shopping list when they're coming to the point of purchase. Okay, does that kind of answer the question?
Yep, absolutely. Nick, you had some thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about behavioural is it's not actual current behaviour, it's post behaviour. So the assumption for most programmatic is what the viewer has done before, the assumption is they're going to do it again. The other great one is what the viewer has done, other viewers like that person will do also, which is another really huge assumption that's built into the way we do programmatic. And I think the thing about contextual and probably why advertisers and agencies are starting to look at it again with more interest is that it does have a better prediction of future behaviour. So rather than that post behaviour, I mean, I was showing the guys when we were talking about this, a pair of sunnies that I bought, and I was chased by those sunnies. Right. All over the internet for at least, I don't think they had a frequency cap on. I think I was chased for at least 12 weeks, and I bought them within like 2 days of first viewing them. So.
And were they offering you a better deal on them?
No.
Because that's the worst when you buy
yeah,
something
that would
and then
really
you get it.
suck.
Yeah,
I would hate
really
them even
sucks.
more then. So yeah, it's just that assumption that we make because we don't have enough information is not always correct, and it creates massive problems for the brand and for the consumer.
That becomes annoying when you change
it
does.
Yeah, isn't it funny when we're watching television, we watch the same Harvey Norman ad, every second ad break, and we just sort of cop it on the chin,
Well, it's still annoying.
Yeah. Oh, yes. Something I forgot to say too. If we would like questions, because we can't imagine we've got 40 minutes worth of content to talk about. But we take your answers, absolutely. And so you want to know how to use the Slido app, yeah, to do that? If you don't, ask the person next to you. Good. There, oh, look, there it is. It's up on screen. Outstanding.
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
It's Thursday. They've been, 2 days of being told at every session.
They're all over it.
Sorry.
Okay. Now, might be worth talking a little bit about GDPR. Everyone here knows what GDPR is, yeah, roughly? Yep? No? Yep? I'm getting a few yeses. I'm going to take that as a yes. John? What's been the impact from your point of view in GDPR and I guess opening up the opportunity for more? Yeah,
I mean, in terms of, again, protecting people's privacy, that's essentially what it's all about. So that's really forced agencies and brands alike to really put contextual advertising back on the map there. And we've seen GDPR come in on the 25th of May in the UK, and brands, agencies have had to react to that fairly quickly. And I think what's really interesting around this is that typically contextual advertising has been really top of the funnel as opposed to your behavioural targeting, which tends to be more performance-based at the bottom of the funnel there. So looking for metrics like click-through rate particularly or cost per acquisition. However, certainly what we've seen in our business at GumGum and research that we've done out of the UK during and post GDPR is that we've actually seen performance rates go up. So I think that stands to reason then. It's just something that's kind of been put to the side by marketers, but it stands to reason. It's common sense that if you're fishing where the fish are in a contextual environment, then you're likely to get a better result, again, because people are in that mindset of being ready to purchase that car, or if you're advertising the travel section for an airline, to make that purchasing choice around that airline. So I think, personally, I'm a supporter of tightening up some privacy around data. I'm certainly not personally a big fan of my personal data being out in the open. So I think this is a good thing in the industry probably need to face, but from a marketing perspective, I think it starts to open up all sorts of interesting questions around how technology can really optimise towards some of that context. And not just the context, the sentiment within that context as well. So by reading not only the words, but the tone of voice, and to a degree the emotion around what people are consuming there, that creates a much more powerful environment for a marketer and to be able to enhance that. And it also creates a better user experience as well.
So John, you were just mentioning there sentiment stuff.
Yep.
So for instance, in the last week or so, there's been a lot of news stories about MH370 and the closing that case. So you're going to see a lot of news stories about aeroplanes and things. Not the ideal place for a holiday advertisement to come up though. So.
This happened recently, and I won't call out the publisher, but it was an article around, if you recall, I can't remember which airline it was now, but the front windows of this particular airline came out, and there was the pilots who were literally sucked out the front. This was a news article that ran, and literally alongside that, in fact, on top of it, was an ad for Qantas. Now, there's an example of, okay, sure, that's contextual, but the sentiment probably wasn't what you wanted to see there as an advertiser. And we're finding now that technology in our business, GumGum, allows us to do this as well, where we're looking at the images on a page and understanding what that image is about, but we're also scanning all the text on a page. So we're looking at a semantic analysis, so understanding not only the context, but how, or the sentiment and the tone of voice, the feeling behind what that article's all about. So that could be a trigger from a positive sense or a negative sense in terms of how you want to deploy an ad there. So in that case with MH370 or the other particular airline problem there, that would become a brand safety issue, obviously. You'd be able to filter that out by understanding the sentiment of the article.
Brand safety, Nick, top of your priority list, I know, marketer.
Well, it depends on where I work. So
Well, your old employer, Woolies, had a few run-ins with
that's
brand
right.
safety.
So in my last role, brand safety was top of mind everywhere you looked. And you know, the trust and the sentiment of where that brand went was really important. When you're at a startup, you actually don't care. You don't give a shit. It's like, if my brand is there, that's fucking good. So I don't care I don't care where it is. So I think, brand safety is an interesting one. I think that, I've always worked quite closely with my agencies on whitelists and blacklists. When I was at eHarmony, it was hilarious. We used to show up on the most fun sites. So slowly but surely you would get a really extensive blacklist after the Russian Bride sites and a few porn sites. So you know, it's kind of just hygiene factors to go through. But I think the bigger the brand, the more that you know you can't make a mistake.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, you know, publishers end up in really major shit when, you know, a major brand gets put next on a terrorist site, for example.
Right.
I've been lucky enough to work for, you know, music brands and online dating brands, and now a mobile media broadcaster. So, you know, it's less of a problem where we might end up.
Yeah.
So I know that's not probably helpful to CMOs and big brands, but yeah.
It's good to know it's not horses for courses, right?
No, that's right.
Yeah, cool. But okay, maybe drill down a little bit. So what can agencies do, you know, to help with that brand safety, but also to, you know, God forbid, actually make a good user experience, like to make the, you know, putting an ad in front of someone something that's actually brand enhancing rather than, you know, detracting.
You want me to take that?
You guys have to either or.
So I think this is not only a targeting question, I think it's a question of creative, okay? And I think, and this comes up all the time, we're talking about targeting, we're talking about hitting the right people at the right time and in the right environment. But if it's a poor message, you're kind of wasting your time, and it's it's kind of disrespectful to the consumer, both from a publisher point of view, but also from an effectiveness point of view. In that, if it's informational in nature and you're able to capture that aligned to the content, then it becomes interesting to the consumer, and you're going to get a better result from it as well. So I think that really needs to be taken into consideration. Nick, you're more of the creative person.
Yeah, I mean, the sad thing about digital, I mean, you've probably heard this a number of times in the last 3 days, and it's always written about, but how digital has kind of killed creative. And I think the sad thing is that relevance has kind of, we assume that relevance and one-to-one personalisation is actually the thing that drives consumer behaviour and consumer action. And we made that assumption, I think, because we understand, the consumer and their ego, and, that they were telling us that they wanted everything on demand the way they wanted it, when they wanted it. But I think as marketers, what we forgot was that the thing that drives humans more than even food, I think, is human connection with other people. So we forgot the whole tribe thing, the community thing, and how to make experiences happen when people aren't alone, when they're not in a one-to-one environment. And so when I get chased around on the internet by sunglasses, for example, not only was it irrelevant because I'd bought the sunglasses, it was also really dull. Like, it was just a picture of the product. And so we've become highly pragmatic with the technology, and even to the point where, we just forget that humans need that entertainment factor. They need to feel like they're experiencing something funny, or that they would share it. I mean, there's no way I would share most programmatic ads that I see. So it's just about, I think the thing that strikes me about some of the smarter use of AI in contextual is that the relevance is in a shareable form. So it's in your news site, or it's in something that you're reading or that you would share, and it's clever. So you kind of rate it. You go, shit, that was smart of that advertiser to put that there. And it's also not, it doesn't have that creepy privacy thing that even though people, I mean, I'm happy to give up my privacy as a marketer, of course I am. But when you do get chased, it's a little tiny reminder that people are watching you. Yeah. Whereas contextual is like, that other people are experiencing this too when they read this news site or they read this article. The one that John shared with me now that I'm at a mobile company was Vodafone advertising in the iPhone launch articles, because there was millions of earned media for iPhone launch, and so suddenly Vodafone was appearing wherever the iPhone X launch was, and it was just like, that's so much more interesting, smarter, doesn't have that creepiness to it, but has, is relevant. So
do you call that newsjacking? Is that what?
Yeah, but it's newsjacking at scale, which is sort of the holy grail for marketers, I think. Because you can go into content marketing, and I love content marketing because it's shareable, but trying to get content marketing to scale is like, it's hell on earth. It's such a high touch marketing activity. So we're always looking for these ways to get that entertainment, that relevance, and that community feel, but at full scale, without us having to talk to 20 influencers and deal with their shit. Yeah, okay. It is shit sometimes to talk to these people, my God.
You mentioned a few things there, and I want to touch on them, is scale, because that's the great thing about behavioural targeting, was you could just spray it out absolutely everywhere, and it's such a low cost that it was an easy bet for an agency to make. But what we've found is that even though it is cheap, it's not necessarily, it's money spent for no reason is not great, so bad. And AI was the other thing. So that starting to learn the artificial intelligence, the machines are getting cleverer. Is this what we're going with contextual? Are we starting to see that we can do this now on a meaningful scale, where you can...
Yes, absolutely. when you can really tap into that sentiment across multiple publishers, whether it be via images or whether it be via text or whether it be via the combination of both and potentially video as well, then you can develop that scale. But I'd caveat that by saying, and I think I said this earlier on, that contextual shouldn't be looked as one or the other with behavioural or demographic or geographic. There's a time and a place for all of it, and the messaging around that can be different at times, or it can be the same depending on what you're trying to achieve. But is the value of the contextual alignment and the relevance and the sentiment more valuable than it just being simply based on behavioural, which may or may not be effective, and it's not as good a quality inventory as such that you're deploying your ad towards?
Well, the harder thing from a marketing point of view is the great thing about programmatic is that you can have it on all the time because it's so cheap.
Yeah.
You can optimise the crap out of it and you can see it trending over time. And that's a great story for you to have in your KPIs. It's a great story for you to take to your CEO. And then, you add remarketing in and wow, that performs even better than the other one, so the prospecting. So then you've got another great story to tell, and you've got swathes of data over time, and you can continue to quite simply show uplifts. And so it's much harder to go on to premium buys that you can't afford all the time and show that optimization. So I think the next step in my challenge, I suppose, in this area is that you can, it can be accessible enough to be on all the time, and to be one of those optimizable media sets that just runs constantly. And then I think that will be one of the barriers that would be removed for marketers. Because it's the reason digital is so attractive to us is that data that we can take to our stakeholders and talk to on a day-to-day basis.
So we're going to have OVO chasing us all around the internet?
No, we're going to be contextually placed at the same price as programmatic. Joking, sort of.
Yeah, cool. But we're not talking just about putting a banner ad or putting an MREC on the page here either, are we? We're talking about smarter executions.
Certainly in GumGum's case, we are. So the first part of what GumGum does is that ability to target contextually via the images, by understanding the images as a human eye would. But the second part of our puzzle is creating what's known as in-image advertising. So this gets back to the quality of the creative again, where you're able to actually blend a creative message into the content of the page as we do within images. Then yes, that's going to be a whole lot more effective than, say, your typical banner ad. And I'd go so far as saying is, if we went back and reinvented display advertising, you probably wouldn't utilise banner ads at all. And there's all sorts of studies, all sorts of research which can prove banner blindness as such, so no one's actually taking any notice of those ads anyway. However, if you're able to capture how a user actually consumes content, and we're becoming a much more visual world anyway, so we know that our eyes are automatically drawn towards images, for instance, and the image, it's the old, an image is worth 1,000 words, but there's also emotion attached to that. So if you're able to blend your messaging within that image in a respectful and almost a native type of way, then yes, you're going to get a much better result.
Okay. It's a bit like getting the chair to turn around at The Voice, isn't it? We've got a few questions come through. So.
Luckily they're in front of us. We don't have to spin.
So I'm going to jump to those, if that's all right with you guys. And
yeah.
then maybe we'll come back to some of my questions. But can you be creative in a targeted programmatic environment? Nick, I think you're sort of talking to that point a little bit already. So.
Yeah, I think you can. It's just harder. And I think if you think about digital from the point of view as I was talking before, it's like an engine and it's running all the time. And so the creative kind of has to fit into this cookie cutter factory line style of creative so that it doesn't become another data point that throws out your perfectly planned optimization that you're doing on another part of either the media buy or whatever else. So I think you need to pull your digital advertising out of that engine, and that's a hard thing to do. I find that hard. And so what we end up doing is having the boring stuff running all the time and then adding in separate creative stuff as one-offs or bursts. And I think that's a shame, because I think what ends up happening is the consumer sees more of the boring stuff and less of the stuff that takes a little bit more thinking, a little bit more time.
They're habituated by then to just ignore all those
Yeah, that's
squares.
right. And then it's like,
I think you can be a little bit more creative with some dynamic ad serving there as well.
I mean, you can pull in weather data, you can pull in, so environmental factors make it really interesting. So there are people that have done it and done it in a machine kind of way where they've actually pulled great different data sets in to make it creative and interesting. And I think that's when you see, those award-winning kind of digital executions happening. I mean, I adore, it's a bit hackneyed, isn't it? But the hunger rhythm is just a beautiful thing where it just takes in the whole community feel on the internet and then affects prices of Snickers bars. It's just fucking brilliant. But so that you can be creative. It's just harder. And I think the technology doesn't push us marketers to make sure that we are. The technology actually incentivizes us to be pretty lazy with the creative.
Yeah.
No, I think we're still dealing with Programmatic 101 too. It's still really early days with Programmatic, and it's only going to get better from a targeting perspective around all sorts of data points, but also how we harness dynamic creative within that environment.
And is that onus on the publishers though to host that dynamic stuff on their sites? Are the publishers keeping up? Because most of them are fairly cash strapped at the moment. So. Experience.
Look, I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that. And I don't think the onus is not only on the publishers, not by any means. I think, it's a matter of the whole ecosystem working together there to some degree. Vendors, publishers, and the agencies, for that matter, alike, trading desks.
Yep, okay. We've got a few more questions there. Do you want to have a go at the next one, John?
I'm going to be cheeky about one of them.
Okay, go on.
No, there's no case studies.
You can all see they're up there, right? Yeah. So.
There's no case studies. I have an opinion sometimes. I know it's hard without data to listen to people, but no, I don't have any case studies for you or data. But John might. Sometimes, I don't know. Just being a marketer for a long time helps you to know shit.
or not sometimes.
Yeah, maybe not. Maybe I don't know.
Case studies as such. Our company has just conducted some research across the US and the UK around this, which we haven't made public just yet. But what we have seen out of that is that certainly we're seeing an uplift when no audience filters were necessarily put across a campaign and it was just contextual advertising.
There you go.
That was a good answer.
Sometimes we forget though that if you look at data, especially in isolated ways, it can actually skew your view, and you have to stop and go back to basics, which is what do we know about human psychology? What do we know about how people, what people love and how people like to interact in the world? And sometimes we don't have data on that. Like, we don't have data really. We have, questionable data on outdoor, for example. So, we're not yet in a world where we have enough accurate data to draw conclusions the way that we think we are. We actually, We have part of the picture through data, and we're getting closer every day. Like we're getting more and more data points. But right now, people are jumping from a small set of data that's incomplete in one section of the human environment, and we are jumping to assumptions based on that and extrapolating it out. And that, I think, is the problem of where we're at the moment. Yeah. We don't have chips in people's heads yet. And until we do, we won't know.
The tech's getting better, I take that point. But surely things like GDPR and brand safety and privacy is going to scale back the data we've got on people, though, isn't it? We're going to have, people are going to start policing that more thoroughly about, you can't know this about someone, you can't be delving in there and stuff.
Right.
Yeah.
I hope not, because... I hope not because I'm a marketer. No, because I hope not, because there's things that technology can bring us that will surprise and delight based on some of these data points. Now, if it's not going to hurt you, like if it's not your bank details and your last name and stealing your address and giving it to the wrong people, then there's data that we can get, like how many times you open and close an app, whether your phone is going at 60 kilometres an hour or not, or whether it's on this angle facing you or flat, that can actually give us indications of whether you're in the mood for content being served, which is a sort of AI that we're working on at the moment. So all of that data, if they shut that down, all that happens is the consumer experience drops. Yeah. And they have to go searching for content rather than it being delivered when they want it. So it's a shame, I think, that if we do go too far with the privacy thing, we will actually slow down what could be a better consumer experience of content, of entertainment, of news, everything. So
kind of related to the creepy question there, but I would. I'm not allowed to answer things. I don't think I'm supposed to ask questions. But anyway, I'm going to have a go anyway.
You can have a go.
Is there too much context? Because I would have argued that the context is relation to the page sort of thing. So if it was me, it'd be a surfing website or something like that, and there's an ad for a surfboard. I'm thinking the advertising is coming because of the content. It's not becoming because of who I am. Is that right, John? Is that what I'm...
I'm not sure I actually really understand that question. I don't think that's creepy at all.
Because you're in marketing and ad tech.
Creepy?
What do you mean?
No, but I think it's creepier if you're being followed around the internet, frankly. I don't think it's about the contextual alignment there. But I think what's creepy is if, from a data perspective, people know, or advertisers, marketers, know what you're buying, where you're buying it, how you're buying it, what time you're buying it. That's a bit creepier to me.
Yeah, okay.
So did anyone, I don't know, there was a guy from Google, the photos guy, Anil, I think, earlier this week. He brought up a product, it was initially called Auto Awesome, which is the most awesome product name ever, but they changed it to Google Assistant, which is quite dull. I don't know why they did that. But when I discovered it I think I discovered it in 2013 on my Nexus 5, and what it did, it was pre-Apple Photos doing this as well. It basically went through my photos and started grouping them, it started animating them, it started auto-filtering them, but it would group them, if I was in one place that wasn't my home for a certain period of time, it would group them into a holiday montage story that you could, and I just discovered it, I think it served it up to me as a message, do you want to see your holiday and so, and I went, oh fuck, that is so fucking creepy. But it was also so, I got over the creepiness because it was so useful. I went, oh my God, that is just, I don't have to do a photo book ever again because Google's just done it for me without me even thinking about it. So I was, maybe I'm weird because I'm a marketer, probably, but I just adored it. So I think if you make it really useful and so useful that it solves a problem, which I think is what he was saying as well, it gets people past the creepiness or helps them to ignore it. But I think the other thing is the lack of knowledge, I think, is a really big problem for people. They don't know how much data is being scraped about their lives and what they're doing. And when they found out, like with Cambridge Analytica, they all freaked out. But if it's, if it's for useful stuff and it's not stuff
Yeah.
that's going to hurt you, I think it's important to keep it open.
Yep. Okay. A few more questions there. The publishers one, there's 2 publisher ones, and we might be able to answer those kind of together. So it's so I guess the bottom one is, what is the panel's view on whether publishers stick to selling based on content first, which is, well, I guess it's automating that process, isn't it? Contextual advertising to a certain extent. So, because you'd think it would find the relevant sections rather than. But yes, can I tell you as a publisher, absolutely, if someone wants to sponsor a section, you go for it.
Yeah, and I mean, you're going to get a better rate for that.
That's right, exactly.
It's better
Yeah, it's all
quality
right, yeah.
inventory, and again, it's a combination of both. You know, there's always inventory that you're going to want to monetize as a publisher that's simply just not as valuable as other inventory. But you'd have to make that commercial decision as to...
Yeah, and there was another one I can't say, but it was about the scale issue again for publishers because of the contextual thing. Your view is that
It's a combination of both.
yeah, but the scale will also be there, right, with contextual stuff as it gets better and better. It's just something that's going to grow.
Yeah, and I mean, I think there was another question about how narrow contextual advertising can be. I mean, it's as narrow as you really want to make it. If you want to get all the way down to keyword, then you can absolutely do that. But if you want to broaden out to, say, a vertical such as sport, for instance, or entertainment, then that's obviously going to broaden it out. And I think the temptation with any targeting is to get really, really narrow,
Yeah.
which certainly is valuable, but it's not the only thing we need to be doing from a marketing approach. It's again, getting back to there being multi-prongs of how we go about getting that messaging out there. Yeah.
Okay. Another thing that's just popped into my mind, it's not the question, but we can use this stuff for brand building purposes, absolutely, can't we? It's not just performance, it's not just, click here to buy the thing. So
Absolutely, and I think where we're going to see technology really drive a lot of this is when we're able to marry up multi-touch attribution modelling more to what contextual advertising or the effectiveness that contextual advertising is having on that actual point of pulling the trigger when the purchase is made. And I think it's very easy for marketers to simply look at basic metrics like click-through rate or cost per acquisition and look at cheap inventory and say, oh, okay, I'm getting my ROI. But I think that doesn't take into consideration some of those areas of brand building that we're able to do via contextual, bought programmatically or bought direct, it doesn't really matter.
And attribution is getting
better.
Getting better.
Yeah.
Like I've used 2 different, one a data-driven attribution and one a algorithmic attribution model in my last 2 roles. So it's getting better at taking into effect things that would be considered maybe brand building or not actually showing up in the CPA because it's not a last click kind of bottom of the funnel channel.
Yeah.
But the thing that I want to see, and I think there's a promise of it from some tech, but we also have to take in off digital platforms into our attribution modelling, and that's my biggest challenge. But yes.
Okay. We're down to just a minute left. Video, is that on the horizon?
Yeah, I mean, in our business, we're looking at images or video is simply a whole bunch of images put together. So something that is we could go down that path.
Yeah.
In terms of how we do use video in our business, we have another area known as GumGum Sport, where we're analysing, say, broadcast sport and identifying logos within those broadcasts, how long those logos are on screen for, the size of those logos, the clarity of those logos, the share of voice with those logos, and then back-ending out a value to that sponsorship. So absolutely videos.
Okay. Very quickly, I see there's a question on how can contextual targeting help with fake news? I guess that's going to be a sentiment thing, isn't it? But it depends on how good the fake news is, would be my
Yeah,
suggestion.
if it's really good fake news, probably not. Probably
Yeah.
target it. I don't know. Just
Yeah,
throwing you in it.
Target only fake news.
yeah. Well, we know some people who are doing that.
Yeah.
For sure.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time, so I'd like to thank Nick and John for taking time. Thank you for your interest in our panel.